My name is Paula Alvarez. I'm a resident of Washington, D.C. I live in Columbia Heights, and I've lived in the district. I grew up here, so it's been a while. For work, I'm a consultant, and I work in the national security space, so it's the intersection between the private sector and the Department of Defense.
I'm Elliot Carter. I grew up in Bethesda, Maryland, which is kind of part of the distant Washington suburban area. I've lived downtown for about 5 years. I work at a communications firm that does Navy work and commercial work. I think a lot of people in this city who either work for the government or know people who work for the government or just walk by government buildings every day, there was a lot of 9/11 reminiscent stuff. Not that there was some kind of mass casualty event, but just in the sense of like kind of outsiders striking at a place that felt near to everyone's heart, and then simultaneously like kind of the cognitive dissonance of like everyone thought the Capitol was basically, a fortress, and just the cognitive dissonance of like people ransacking or whatever. It's like barbarians in the temple or something, that sort of a phenomenon. It's just like impossible to kind of wrap your head around.
So working in international relations, watching what happened in the Capitol, for me it felt a lot like it was a very visible image of what represents American democracy, and to see everything that happened, I think that was the image more than obviously the immediate fear for those inside the Capitol. I think it was the image of what it represented on the day that they were certifying the electoral votes, because the United States has been, promoting democracy worldwide and emphasizing that its own democracy is so important and like unmovable and just the best of the best, essentially. And suddenly you see these guys who come from all over the United States armed. Essentially they're militia guys, right? They're unimportant to some degree, and they've somehow been able to bring down this all-time symbol. So I think that was really powerful, and that's where a lot of the fear came from, rather than like immediate fear of violence, like personal violence or violence in the district.
Yeah, I think people here like viscerally feel kind of violated.
Yes. Yeah, so as someone who works adjacent to the government and mostly in national security, the way we took the events in the Capitol was mostly as a national security issue, because of the image that gives of the United States. And again, it wasn't of the immediate like danger or violence even though there was some of that, right, for the people who were in the Capitol at the moment, but Secret Service acted rapidly, and they took, Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi, so that was an immediate national security threat. It's more of like, how will everybody else see us now that we have let people come into our government, quite literally, because the Capitol represents government in the United States, on the day that they're certifying an election. The last time that happened was in like 18 something, like very early 1800s. And 1812, right? And so the modern United States has never not had a peaceful transfer of power. And so that sends a really powerful image both to allies and to enemies, right? Not only in the power that the United States holds, but also in what it's going to be able to do moving forward in the rest of the world.
Yeah, I'm going to offer an answer as a local Washingtonian. So I've lived here for 28 years. Since 2001, I guess, we've all grown up watching the anti-terrorism stuff completely reshape the fabric of this city. People's routines fundamentally changed. The shapes of buildings fundamentally changed. Like, whole swaths of the city that used to be public spaces or squares or places where you could sit under the shade and eat lunch or whatever, have been like permanently locked down. Forest of bollards and anti-truck barriers proliferate around buildings, and like people have gotten used to guards with machine guns outside the subway or on the steps of an agency you've never heard of. And it's become like so part of the background music of this town that like it kind of happened incrementally, I guess, and nobody took a second to, I don't know. The events of the Capitol, part of like the mindfuck of it was that like we have rebuilt this entire city around the notion of like foreign extremists coming here and flying airplanes into buildings or using truck bombs. And like you just told us that actually if you're a militiaman, you can walk in with an AR-15.
I'll add on to that because I think for those of us who live here, also the stark contrast from what happened in June with the BLM protests is huge because aside from, you know, the immediate meaning of all of that, but living in the city, the police presence and the National Guard presence regarding those protests, I mean, you were at those a lot more, but most of those were incredibly peaceful and they had no other reason than, you know, to express sentiment of what the United States was going to. And we can say that because we were here. And sure, there was some violence, but it was like pretty limited and limited to certain places and times, right? And so compare that to people who came into the district armed, which is not legal in the District of Columbia, with automatic weapons, with clear intentions of violence, and nearly, I mean, the police presence was like null.
Yeah, that's it. Like the feeling of like we put up with so much of this stuff, I guess, and we follow these rules, and people who outsiders basically come in and don't obey our rules and I don't know, get away with it, like don't suffer any consequences, whereas like we had neighbors who were run down by horses and rubber bullets so that, you know, the president can walk across 16th Street and take a photograph. Like,
yeah, so I'd say to everyone that images are really powerful, so the images coming outside of Washington are really impactful, but I would say that that's not actually the important thing that we're living through. I think that we're living through a really big change as a country, which should force us to have a lot of introspection rather than focus on the little things that we see of, oh my God, I can't believe we sent the National Guard to Washington, D.C., or I can't believe there wasn't any public at the inauguration. That's not the point of this. The point is that we have created such breaches in the society that have been happening for hundreds of years that we've ignored, and we can't ignore them anymore. It's too late.